Blood dripped onto my hardwood floor, my own blood, in my own home. The metallic taste filled my mouth as I stared up at my youngest son, Lucas Holmes, his fists still clenched, his face twisted with rage. At 64 years old, I never imagined I'd be on the ground, beaten by the child I raised with nothing but love and sacrifice. "Learn to respect me, you damn old woman," he screamed, his voice echoing through the living room where Christmas decorations still hung from our family gathering just days before. His 32-year-old wife Isabella stood beside him, her pregnant belly prominent at 7 months, her hands actually clapping as she watched me bleed. The sound of her applause still haunts me. Cold, calculated, cruel. My name is Patricia Lambert, and I've lived in Hartford, Connecticut for 43 years. I raised 3 children in this house, worked 2 jobs to pay for their education, and sacrificed $127,000 of my retirement savings to help Lucas start his construction business 5 years ago. I never asked for gratitude, never demanded respect. I simply loved unconditionally, the way mothers do. But as I lay there, tasting my own blood, watching my daughter-in-law celebrate my humiliation, something inside me shifted. The fog of denial that had clouded my vision for months suddenly cleared. All those late-night phone calls Isabella made when she thought no one was listening. The way she avoided certain topics about her pregnancy. The strange timing of her supposed conception that never quite added up. I stood up slowly, wiping the blood from my split lip with the back of my hand. My son and his wife watched me with smug satisfaction, believing they had finally broken the spirit of the woman who had given them everything. Lucas had moved back into my house 6 months ago when his business faced financial troubles, bringing Isabella and her mysterious pregnancy with him. The Christmas tree lights twinkled behind them, creating an almost surreal backdrop to this moment of pure betrayal. Isabella's hand rested on her belly, and for the first time, I truly looked at her, really looked. The truth had been hiding in plain sight, and I had been too loving, too trusting, too naive to see it. "Does he know the truth about that pregnancy?" I asked calmly, my voice steady despite the blood trickling down my chin. The transformation in Isabella's face was instantaneous. Her smug smile vanished, replaced by a pallor so white she looked like she might faint. Her hands trembled as she instinctively moved them to cover her belly, and in that moment, I knew everything. The room fell silent, except for the gentle humming of the Christmas tree lights and the distant sound of traffic outside. Lucas looked confused, his anger temporarily forgotten as he glanced between his wife and me. The power dynamic in that room shifted so quickly it was almost audible. "What are you talking about?" Lucas demanded, but his voice lacked the conviction it had held moments before. He sensed something had changed, though he couldn't yet grasp what. Isabella opened her mouth, then closed it, no words coming out. Her face had gone from white to a sickly green, and I watched as 24 years of marriage to my son flashed through her eyes, all the lies, all the careful deceptions, all about to crumble because of one simple question. I straightened my shoulders, ignoring the pain in my jaw where his fist had connected. After 6 decades of life, 43 years in this house, and $127,000 in sacrifices for this family, I was about to discover just how deep betrayal could go. The truth was coming, whether they were ready or not. If you're enjoying this dramatic story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of family betrayal and justice. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Isabella's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, while Lucas's confused expression slowly transformed into something darker, suspicion. I had planted a seed of doubt, and I could already see it beginning to sprout in his mind. "Mom, what the hell are you talking about?" Lucas's voice was different now, less certain, tinged with fear he couldn't yet name. I walked to my kitchen sink, slowly cleaning the blood from my face while they watched. Every movement was deliberate, calculated. I had learned something important about power in that moment. Sometimes the person who asks the right question holds all the cards. "Isabella, honey," I said sweetly, turning back to face them both. "Why don't you tell Lucas about your doctor's appointments? The ones you've been going to alone?" Another wave of panic crossed her face. Lucas works so hard. I didn't want to bother him with routine checkups." "Routine checkups?" I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call meeting with Dr. Richardson at the fertility clinic downtown? The color drained from Lucas's face now too. What fertility clinic? Isabella, what is she talking about? I had spent $3,200 of my own money hiring a private investigator 3 weeks ago. Something about Isabella's pregnancy had never sat right with me. The timing, her behavior, the way she avoided certain questions. At first I thought I was being paranoid, a jealous mother-in-law creating problems where none existed. But my instincts, honed by 64 years of life and 38 years of being Lucas's mother, told me something was wrong. Tell him about the surrogacy agreement, Isabella, I said quietly. Tell him about the real parents of that baby. Isabella's knees buckled, and she grabbed onto the back of my couch for support. Lucas caught her arm, his face a mask of confusion and growing horror. Surrogacy? What surrogacy? Isabella, talk to me. The private investigator's report had been thorough. Isabella had been struggling with infertility for 2 years. Instead of telling Lucas the truth, she had secretly entered into a surrogacy agreement with a wealthy couple from New York. She was carrying their baby, their biological child created through IVF, and was being paid $75,000 for her services. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what she planned to do with the money and what would happen after the baby was born. She's not just carrying someone else's child, Lucas, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. She's planning to disappear with their money and claim the baby died during childbirth. She was going to sell their child and run away, leaving you to grieve for a baby that was never yours to begin with. Lucas released Isabella's arm so quickly she stumbled. Is this true? His voice was barely a whisper. Isabella finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate shriek. She's lying. She's a bitter old woman who can't stand to see us happy. The fertility clinic has records, Isabella. Dr. Richardson has been very cooperative with certain inquiries. The real parents, Jonathan and Marie Chen, have been sending you money for medical expenses. Money you've been hiding in a separate bank account at First National. I watched my son's world crumble in real time. The man who had just struck his mother, who had watched his wife applaud my humiliation, was now seeing the woman he loved for who she truly was. The baby he'd been preparing to welcome, the nursery he'd spent weeks painting, the future he'd imagined. All of it built on lies. $75,000, I continued relentlessly. That's what you sold your integrity for. That's the price you put on my son's heart. Isabella's facade finally cracked completely. You don't understand. We needed the money. His business is failing and we have bills. So you decided to steal someone else's baby and destroy my son in the process? Lucas stood frozen, his hands shaking. The baby isn't mine. The baby belongs to the Chen family. They've been trying to have children for 7 years. They trusted Isabella to carry their child safely and return him to them when he's born. Instead, she planned to steal him and disappear. The Christmas decorations seemed obscene now, mocking us with their cheerful lights and promises of family joy. I thought about all the times I'd rubbed Isabella's belly, talked to my grandchild, planned for his arrival. The nursery upstairs, the tiny clothes we'd purchased, the dreams we'd all shared, poisoned by greed and deception. Lucas sank into my recliner, his head in his hands. How long have you known? I suspected something 3 months ago. I've known for certain for 3 weeks. And you said nothing? I looked at the man I'd raised, the son who had just beaten me in my own home. I was trying to figure out the best way to tell you. I never imagined it would come to this. Isabella was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration, of a plan unraveling, of consequences approaching like a freight train. The foundation of lies was cracking, and everything built upon it was about to come crashing down. The truth has a way of illuminating dark corners you never knew existed. As Lucas sat in stunned silence, I realized this was only the beginning. If Isabella could orchestrate such an elaborate deception about the pregnancy, what else had she been hiding? How long? Lucas finally asked, his voice hollow. How long have you been planning this? Isabella's tears had stopped, replaced by something colder. When cornered, she revealed her true nature, calculating and cruel. Since before we moved in here, she admitted. The surrogacy contract was signed 8 months ago, right before your business started failing. The implications hit Lucas like physical blows. His business troubles hadn't been random bad luck. They had been part of her timeline. She had needed a reason to move into my house, to establish a support system that would make her disappearance more believable. "You sabotaged my contracts," Lucas said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The Morrison job, the Henderson renovation. You called them, didn't you?" I watched my daughter-in-law's mask slip entirely. "You were never going to make enough money. We were struggling, and this opportunity presented itself. The Chens were desperate, and I saw a way out. A way out that involved stealing their child. They'll have other chances. They have money. They can try again with another surrogate. But this was our only shot at real money." The casual cruelty of her words sent chills down my spine. She spoke about the Chens, about their 7-year struggle with infertility, their hopes and dreams, as if they were merely obstacles to her financial goals. I pulled out my phone and showed Lucas the photos the private investigator had taken. "She's been meeting with a man named Derek Walsh. He has connections to black market adoption rings. The plan was to fake the baby's death, then sell him to the highest bidder while keeping the Chens $75,000. Lucas studied the photos of his wife meeting with Walsh in parking lots, exchanging envelopes, planning the theft of an innocent child. "How much?" he whispered. "How much were you going to sell him for?" $200,000, Isabella answered defiantly. "Maybe more, if the buyers were desperate enough." The number hung in the air like a curse. $275,000 total, the price she had put on destroying multiple families, including her own. I thought about the $127,000 I had given Lucas for his business, money that had ultimately funded this betrayal. "The Chen family," I said quietly. "They have a daughter. She's 6 years old, and she's been praying every night for her baby brother to arrive safely. Marie Chen told me this when I called her yesterday." Lucas's head snapped up. "You called them?" "I had to. They deserved to know that their baby was safe, that their surrogate was in a stable environment. What I discovered was that Isabella had been lying to them too. She told them she was staying with her sister in Boston, not living with us in Hartford. The web of lies was vast and intricate. Isabella had created multiple false identities, fake addresses, and elaborate cover stories to keep all parties separated and uninformed. She had even forged medical records to show complications that didn't exist, building a foundation for the baby's supposed death. "Show him the bank statements," I said to Isabella. "Show him the account you opened in your maiden name." She glared at me with pure hatred. "You had no right to investigate me. I had every right to protect my family. And the Chens are family now too, connected to us through the child you're carrying." I had printed copies of everything. Bank statements showing deposits from the Chens for medical expenses, payments to Derek Walsh for consultation fees, and a paper trail that led to forged documents and bribed officials who would falsify a death certificate. Lucas examined each document with growing horror. "You've been planning this for almost a year. The pregnancy, moving in with Mom, the business problems, all of it was calculated." "What did you expect me to do?" Isabella screamed. "Spend the rest of my life poor? Watch you fail at every business you try? I found a way to set us up for life. By destroying innocent people. By taking care of us. The Chens have money. They'll survive. But this was our chance to have what they have." The selfishness was breathtaking. She had taken advantage of a family's desperation to have children, manipulated my son's trust, and exploited my love for my family. The baby moving in her belly, Jonathan and Marie Chen's son, was nothing more than a commodity to her. I looked at Lucas, seeing the boy I had raised fighting with the man he had become. The son who had struck me an hour ago was learning that everything he thought he knew about his life was a lie. His wife, his marriage, his future, all of it had been carefully orchestrated deception. "There's more," I said quietly. "The private investigator found something else." Isabella's face went white again. She knew what was coming. "You're not the only surrogate she's been working with Walsh to exploit. There are 3 other women, all carrying babies for desperate couples, all being coached to fake their children's deaths for black market sales." The scope of the operation was staggering. Isabella wasn't just a desperate woman making a terrible choice. She was part of a criminal enterprise that had been destroying families for profit. Lucas stood up slowly, his entire body shaking with rage and grief. "How many families?" he asked. "How many families were you planning to destroy?" "As many as it took," Isabella answered, her defiance cracking under the weight of her own admissions. The web had unraveled completely, revealing a darkness none of us had imagined possible. The next morning, brought no relief from the nightmare. Lucas hadn't spoken to Isabella since her final admission, and she had locked herself in the guest room, refusing to come out. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of a criminal conspiracy that reached far beyond my own family's betrayal. At precisely 9 a.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Detective Sarah Martinez from the Hartford Police Department, along with FBI agent Robert Chen, no relation to Jonathan and Marie, but the coincidence felt like divine intervention. "Mrs. Lambert," Detective Martinez said when I opened the door, "we received some very interesting information yesterday evening. I had called them after Lucas went to bed, unable to carry the weight of Isabella's crimes alone any longer. The theft of children, the exploitation of desperate families, this was bigger than personal betrayal. This was about justice. Please come in," I said, leading them to my living room where the Christmas tree still stood, now a monument to shattered innocence. Agent Chen opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file. "We've been investigating Derek Walsh for 6 months. He's been running an elaborate baby trafficking operation, but we've been unable to get close enough to gather evidence. Your daughter-in-law might be our key witness." The irony wasn't lost on me. Isabella's greed and betrayal, the very qualities that had destroyed our family, might now serve to protect other families from the same fate. Lucas appeared at the top of the stairs, looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face gaunt with grief. "Are you arresting her?" "That depends on her cooperation," Detective Martinez replied. "If she's willing to help us stop Walsh and his operation, we might be able to work out an arrangement." The guest room door opened and Isabella emerged, her pregnant belly making her movement awkward. She looked at the officers with defiance that quickly crumbled into fear when she saw the handcuffs on Detective Martinez's belt. "Isabella Holmes," Agent Chen began formally, "you're under investigation for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, fraud, and participation in a human trafficking operation." "I want a lawyer," she said immediately. "That's your right. But you should know that we have enough evidence to charge you with multiple felonies. The bank records, the communications with Walsh, the forged documents, it's all there." I watched my son's wife, the woman who had been planning to steal an innocent child for profit, realized that her carefully constructed plan was collapsing around her. The other surrogates in Walsh's network had already been contacted by the FBI. 2 had agreed to cooperate. The 3rd had disappeared entirely. "The families you were planning to destroy," Detective Martinez continued, "they deserve justice. The Chens, the Washingtons, the Rodriguez family, they've all been living in hope that they'll soon hold their children. Instead, you were planning to tell them their babies had died." Isabella's composure finally broke completely. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. We just needed money." "You were going to steal children and sell them to human traffickers," Agent Chen said flatly. "That's not about money. That's about evil." Lucas sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "What happens to the baby?" "The Chen's baby will be returned to them safely," Detective Martinez assured him. "They've been informed of the situation and are working with social services to ensure proper medical care during the remaining pregnancy." I felt a wave of relief knowing that Jonathan and Marie Chen would finally hold their son. Their 6-year-old daughter would get to meet the baby brother she'd been praying for. At least one good thing would come from this nightmare. "As for your cooperation," Agent Chen addressed Isabella directly, "Walsh is planning to move his operation out of state next week. If you help us stop him, the district attorney might consider reduced charges." Isabella looked at Lucas with desperate eyes. "Please, baby, tell them I'll cooperate. Tell them we can work this out." But Lucas didn't look at her. Instead, he looked at me, his mother, the woman he had beaten just 24 hours ago. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for what I did to you." "I know, son. No, you don't understand. I hit you. I actually hit my own mother because of her lies. I don't know how to live with that." The pain in his voice was raw and real. This was the child I had raised, the good man who had been manipulated and deceived until he lost himself completely. Isabella's betrayal hadn't just involved stealing a baby. She had turned my son into someone he never should have become. "Lucas," I said gently, "your father used to tell me that a man is measured not by his mistakes, but by how he responds to them. You can't undo what happened yesterday, but you can choose what happens next." Agent Chen was taking notes, documenting every admission, every piece of evidence that would help them build their case against Walsh. The investigation had been ongoing for months, but they had needed someone on the inside to provide the final pieces of the puzzle. The other families, I asked Detective Martinez, will they get their children safely? Thanks to your information, yes. We've already contacted the remaining surrogates, and they've agreed to complete their pregnancies under protective custody. The babies will go to their rightful families. Isabella looked around the room, at the police officers, at her husband who wouldn't meet her eyes, at me with my bruised face, and finally understood that her choices had consequences she could never escape. The reckoning had begun, and justice was no longer just a hope. It was a promise. The next week passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media attention, and painful revelations. Isabella had agreed to cooperate with the FBI in exchange for a plea deal, but the damage to our family was irreversible. The baby, Jonathan and Marie Chen's son, continued to develop healthily, monitored now by court-appointed medical staff. Lucas moved out of my house and into a small apartment across town. He couldn't bear to be around Isabella, but he also couldn't stand the constant reminder of what he had done to me. The bruises on my face had faded, but the memory of his fist connecting with my jaw haunted both of us. Mrs. Lambert, FBI agent Chen said during one of our follow-up meetings, "I want you to know that your courage in reporting this has saved at least 12 children from being trafficked. 12 families who would now get to hold their babies instead of grieving for children who were never really dead." The scope of Walsh's operation had been staggering. A network of desperate surrogates, corrupt medical professionals, and wealthy buyers who didn't ask questions about where their adopted children came from. "What will happen to Isabella?" I asked, though I wasn't sure why I still cared. With her cooperation, she'll likely serve 2 to 5 years in federal prison. Without it, she would have faced 15 to 20 years. The baby would be born while she was in custody, then immediately placed with his rightful parents. Isabella would never hold the child she had carried for 9 months, a poetic justice that felt both appropriate and heartbreaking. My phone rang constantly now, reporters wanting to interview the grandmother who exposed the trafficking ring, true crime podcasters seeking details, and curious neighbors who had never paid attention to me before, but suddenly found my story fascinating. I ignored most of them, but I did agree to speak with Sarah Chen, a reporter for the Hartford Courant who had been covering the story with sensitivity and accuracy. She wanted to focus on the victims, the families who had nearly lost their children to greed. "The financial impact on your family must be significant," Sarah said during our interview. "You invested $127,000 in your son's business, which was essentially funding this conspiracy without your knowledge." It was true. Every dollar I had given Lucas to help his construction company had ultimately supported Isabella's deception. The business failures hadn't been random. They had been calculated to create the desperation that made her crimes seem justified. "Money can be replaced," I told Sarah. "Trust, once broken, is much harder to rebuild." Lucas visited me 3 days later, looking haggard and ashamed. He carried a bouquet of roses, my favorite flowers, and an envelope that he placed on my kitchen table with shaking hands. "I can't give you back what I took," he said quietly. "I can't undo hitting you, can't erase the words I said, but I can start trying to make things right." Inside the envelope was a check for $127,000, every penny I had invested in his business. "Lucas, where did you get this money?" "I sold everything. The trucks, the equipment, the inventory. I liquidated the entire business and paid off the debts first. This is what was left." I looked at my youngest son, seeing the boy who used to bring me dandelions picked from the yard and call them sunshine flowers. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did. That money represented your faith in me, your sacrifice for my dreams. Isabella turned it into something ugly, but I want to give you back the original gift, your belief that I could succeed." We sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the ghosts of our shattered family. The Christmas decorations were gone now, replaced by the stark reality of winter light streaming through bare windows. "Will you ever forgive me?" he asked. "I already have," I said, and I meant it. "The question is whether you can forgive yourself." He broke down then, sobbing like the child he had once been. I held him while he cried. This man who had betrayed me and hit me and caused me more pain than I thought possible. Because that's what mothers do. We love our children even when they break our hearts. "I'm going to counseling," he said when his tears subsided. "Individual therapy and anger management and whatever else it takes to make sure I never become that person again. Good. And I'm thinking about moving away, starting over somewhere new. This town, this house, everything here reminds me of what I did. The thought of losing him entirely terrified me, but I understood his need to rebuild himself somewhere free from the weight of his mistakes. Where will you go? Maybe Colorado. I have a friend there who runs a construction company. He offered me a job, a chance to learn the business the right way. I thought about my empty house, the silence that would fill it once he left. But I also thought about the boy who used to dream of building houses, who used to sketch blueprints on napkins and promise to build me a castle someday. When do you leave? After the trial, after I testify against Walsh and see this through to the end. It seemed fitting that his journey toward redemption would begin with helping to bring justice to the man who had preyed on desperate families. The price of betrayal had been enormous. A destroyed marriage, a shattered family, children nearly lost to trafficking. But perhaps something good could still emerge from the wreckage. The roses he brought me were yellow, not red for love, but yellow for new beginnings. Federal court was a cold, imposing place that smelled of old wood and desperate prayers. I sat in the gallery behind the prosecution table, watching as Derek Walsh was led into the courtroom in shackles. He looked ordinary, the kind of man you'd pass on the street without a second glance. It was terrifying how evil could wear such a mundane face. Isabella sat at the witness table, her pregnancy now at 9 months, looking fragile and frightened. The baby would be born any day now, and Jonathan and Marie Chen sat 3 rows behind me, their hands clasped tightly together as they watched the woman who had carried their son for 9 months. Your Honor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez began her opening statement. This case is about the systematic exploitation of human hope. The defendants preyed on families desperate to have children, turning their dreams into nightmares for profit. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing payments from victim families totaling over $400,000. Forged documents designed to fake infant deaths. Communications between Walsh and his network of complicit surrogates planning the theft and sale of 12 babies. Lucas sat beside me, his testimony scheduled for day 3. He had lost 30 pounds since the arrest, his face gaunt with guilt and sleepless nights. But he was here, ready to face the consequences of his unknowing participation in Isabella's crimes. Mrs. Holmes, the prosecutor said as Isabella took the stand, please tell the court about your relationship with Derek Walsh. Isabella's voice was barely audible. I met Derek through an online forum for surrogates. He said he could help me make extra money if I was willing to be flexible about the terms of my contracts. What did flexible mean? He wanted me to build relationships with the intended parents, gain their trust, then work with him to fake complications that would require me to give birth in a specific hospital where he had contacts. The plan had been diabolical in its simplicity. The corrupt medical staff would declare the babies stillborn, issue false death certificates, and then Walsh would sell the healthy infants to buyers who paid premium prices for untraceable children. How much were you paid for each baby you helped steal? $75,000 from the intended parents, plus another $50,000 from Walsh's buyers, $125,000 per stolen child. Isabella had been scheduled to deliver 4 babies over 18 months, $500,000 in blood money that would have destroyed 4 families and condemned 4 children to unknown fates. Marie Chen began crying quietly when Isabella described the fake medical emergencies she had planned to create. The thought of receiving that phone call, being told that their miracle baby had died during birth, was unbearable. The Chen baby, the prosecutor continued. What were your specific plans for him? I was supposed to induce labor early and deliver at St. Mary's Hospital, where Dr. Williams would declare the baby stillborn. Then Walsh would take him to buyers in Florida who were paying $200,000. Jonathan Chen stood up abruptly and left the courtroom, unable to listen to how close they had come to losing their son forever. The baby that Marie was carrying now, safely monitored and protected by court order, would be born into their loving arms instead of sold to strangers. When Lucas took the stand, his voice was strong despite his obvious pain. I had no knowledge of my wife's activities. I trusted her completely, which I now understand was naive. But I want the court to know that my mother, Patricia Lambert, is the hero in this story. Without her investigation and courage, these crimes would have continued. The defense attorney tried to paint Isabella as a victim herself, a desperate woman manipulated by the more sophisticated Walsh. But the evidence of her active participation, her detailed planning, and her callous disregard for the families she was betraying made that argument hollow. Dr. Williams, the corrupt physician, had already pleaded guilty and testified about the network of medical professionals Walsh had recruited. Nurses who falsified records, administrators who covered up the trafficking, ambulance drivers who transported stillborn babies to secret locations. The conspiracy had tentacles reaching throughout the medical community. On day 4, Walsh himself took the stand in his own defense, and his testimony revealed the true scope of his operation. He had been running baby trafficking networks in 6 states, stealing an estimated 47 children over 3 years. The families who had lost babies in his hospitals had been grieving for children who were actually being raised by strangers across the country. The demand for healthy infants is enormous, Walsh testified, with chilling matter-of-factness. People will pay any price, ask no questions. If you can provide them with a baby, they can claim as their own. The victims, the real intended parents, testified about their experiences. The Washingtons described the devastating phone call telling them their daughter had died during birth, only to learn months later that she was alive and living with a family in Nevada. The Rodriguez family spoke about the grief counseling they had undergone, the memorial service they had held, the grave marker they had purchased for a baby who had never died. As the trial progressed, I realized that Isabella's betrayal of our family had been just one thread in a vast web of human suffering. The $127,000 I had lost seemed insignificant compared to the emotional devastation these families had endured. But justice was coming. I could see it in the jury's faces as they listened to victim after victim describe their stolen children and shattered dreams. The truth, once revealed, had a power that no amount of money or manipulation could overcome. The trial would soon end, but the healing for all of us was just beginning. Isabella went into labor during the prosecution's closing arguments. The irony of the timing wasn't lost on anyone. As the prosecutor detailed her crimes against families desperate for children, she was about to give birth to a child who would finally go to his rightful parents. I rushed to the hospital with Lucas and the Chens, all of us caught between anticipation and anxiety. After 9 months of deception and legal proceedings, Jonathan and Marie Chen were finally going to meet their son. "Mrs. Lambert," Marie Chen said to me in the hospital waiting room, "I want you to know that despite everything Isabella did, I'm grateful she carried our baby safely. He's healthy because of the medical care you helped ensure he received." The generosity of her spirit amazed me. This woman who had been betrayed and nearly robbed of her child was expressing gratitude toward our family. It made Isabella's crimes seem even more heinous in contrast. Lucas paced the hallway, struggling with emotions he couldn't name. "That could have been my stepson," he said quietly. "I was planning to love that baby, raise him, never knowing he belonged to another family." The psychological damage Isabella had inflicted went far beyond financial fraud. She had manipulated Lucas's paternal instincts, made him bond with a child she planned to steal, turned his love into an unwitting tool of her crimes. At 3:47 a.m., Jonathan Chen Jr. was born weighing 7 pounds, 4 ounces. He was perfect, healthy lungs that announced his arrival to the entire maternity ward, 10 tiny fingers that would grow up to know his real parents' touch, eyes that would see the family that had prayed for him for 7 years. Isabella never asked to hold him. She signed the relinquishment papers from her hospital bed without looking at the baby she had carried, the child she had planned to sell. Her maternal instincts, if they had ever existed, had been completely overwhelmed by her greed. "He's beautiful," Marie whispered as she held her son for the first time, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, God. Thank you." Jonathan Sr. called their daughter from the hospital room, and I could hear 6-year-old Emily's excited squeals through the phone as she learned her baby brother had finally arrived. The family that had been on the verge of devastating loss was now complete. 2 days later, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Derek Walsh was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Dr. Williams received 12 years. The nurses and administrators who had participated received sentences ranging from 3 to 8 years. Isabella, because of her cooperation and the fact that she hadn't actually completed her planned crimes, received 4 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole in 2.5 years. Mrs. Holmes, Judge Patricia Hawkins said during sentencing, your crimes strike at the heart of human family bonds. You betrayed not only the families whose children you planned to steal, but your own family who trusted and loved you. The fact that you carried these babies safely doesn't mitigate the evil of your intentions. Lucas didn't attend Isabella's sentencing. He had filed for divorce the week after her arrest and was already making plans to move to Colorado. Our family's healing couldn't begin until we were free from the toxic presence that had infected it. But something unexpected happened as the legal proceedings concluded. The other victim families, the Washingtons, the Rodriguez family, the others, began reaching out to me. They saw me as someone who understood their pain, who had also been betrayed by someone they trusted. You lost something too, Jennifer Washington told me when she called. You lost your faith in your family, your sense of safety in your own home. That's trauma, even if it's different from ours. She was right. The physical bruises from Lucas's attack had healed, but the deeper wounds, the knowledge that someone I loved could lie so completely, could plan such cruelty, would take much longer to fade. The FBI had frozen all of Walsh's assets and was working to return money to the victim families. The Chens would get back their $75,000 plus damages. But no amount of money could restore the months of anxiety they had endured, wondering if their baby was safe. 3 weeks after little Jonathan's birth, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a photo of the Chen family: Jonathan, Marie, 6-year-old Emily, and baby Jonathan Jr., along with a handwritten note from Marie. Dear Patricia, you saved our son, not just from being stolen, but from growing up without knowing his real family's love. Emily talks about you as the angel who protected her baby brother. We will tell Jonathan Jr. about you as he grows up, about the brave grandmother who chose truth over family loyalty. You are part of our story forever now. With love and gratitude, the Chen family. I put the photo on my refrigerator, next to pictures of Lucas as a child. Both images represented hope, one for the family that had been saved, one for the son I was still trying to forgive. Justice had been served, but the real work of rebuilding was just beginning. Spring arrived early that year, as if nature itself was eager to wash away the darkness of the previous months. I spent my days reorganizing my house, removing every trace of Isabella's presence, trying to reclaim my space as my own. Lucas had been gone for 3 weeks now, settling into his new life in Denver. He called every Sunday, our conversations cautious and careful as we navigated this new relationship built on the wreckage of the old one. The mountains are beautiful, Mom, he told me during one of our calls. I'm working with a crew that builds custom homes for families, with real dreams. It feels honest. I understood what he meant. After months of lies and deception, honesty felt like a luxury we had forgotten how to afford. Are you happy? I asked him. I'm not sure I know what happy means anymore, but I'm at peace for the first time in years. The therapist says that's a good start. The victim families had formed an informal support group, meeting monthly to share their experiences and help each other heal. They had invited me to join them, recognizing that I too was a victim of Isabella's crimes, just in a different way. Betrayal by someone you love leaves a special kind of scar, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the group therapist, explained during my first meeting. It makes you question your own judgment, wonder what other lies you might have missed. Jennifer Washington nodded. I found myself checking my husband's phone, questioning things he said, even though I knew he had nothing to do with what happened to us. It's like Isabella's lies infected my ability to trust anyone. The Rodriguez family shared photos of their daughter Sophia, who had been returned to them after 18 months with her illegal adoptive family. The little girl was struggling with attachment issues, confused about who her real parents were after bonding with the people who had purchased her from Walsh's network. She calls us by our first names, Maria Rodriguez said tearfully. She knows we're her biological parents, but emotionally, she still sees us as strangers. The ripple effects of the trafficking ring extended far beyond the immediate crimes. Children who had been sold were now displaced from the only families they remembered. Adoptive parents who had unknowingly purchased trafficked babies faced legal battles and moral dilemmas. The web of destruction seemed endless, but there were victories too. Jonathan Chen Jr. was thriving with his parents, already showing signs of his father's determination and his mother's gentle spirit. Emily Chen had embraced her role as big sister with enthusiasm, reading to her baby brother and helping with his care. The Washingtons had been reunited with their daughter after a complex legal battle that required overturning an adoption that had been completed through fraud. The little girl was adjusting well, showing remarkable resilience for a 3-year-old who had been through such trauma. I received updates about Isabella's prison life through Lucas, who maintained minimal contact with her for legal reasons related to their divorce. She was serving her time at FCI Danbury, a federal women's prison in Connecticut, working in the library and reportedly taking classes in child psychology, an irony that wasn't lost on anyone. "She wants to see me," Lucas told me during one of our Sunday calls. "She's written 3 letters asking me to visit. What will you do?" "Nothing. There's nothing she could say that would change what happened. I need to focus on moving forward, not looking back." I admired his strength. It would have been easy to visit her, to seek explanations or closure that might never come. But sometimes the healthiest choice is to simply walk away from toxicity, even when it comes disguised as remorse. My own healing was progressing slowly. I had returned the $127,000 Lucas had given me, insisting he use it to build his new life in Colorado. The money felt tainted somehow, connected to too much pain to bring me any comfort. Instead, I had begun volunteering with a local organization that helped families navigate the adoption process legally and ethically. My experience with Isabella's crimes had given me insights into the vulnerabilities that traffickers exploited, and I wanted to help protect other families from similar predators. "You're channeling your trauma into service," Dr. Martinez observed during one of our group sessions. "That's a powerful form of healing." The work was emotionally challenging, but deeply satisfying. I reviewed adoption agencies' credentials, helped prospective parents identify red flags in private adoption arrangements, and counseled families who were struggling with infertility about legitimate options for building their families. One afternoon, while reviewing case files at the organization's office, I received a call that would change everything once again. "Mrs. Lambert?" The voice was unfamiliar but official sounding. "This is Detective Raymond Torres with the Denver Police Department. I'm calling about your son, Lucas Holmes." My blood went cold. "Is he hurt? What's happened?" "He's fine, ma'am. Actually, he's been very helpful in an ongoing investigation. We understand he has experience with human trafficking cases, and we could use his assistance with a situation that has some similarities to what happened in Hartford." The past was reaching into Lucas's new life, offering him a chance to turn his pain into purpose. The call would lead to revelations none of us could have imagined, and a final confrontation with the shadows Isabella's crimes had cast over our entire family. Lucas's voice was stronger than I'd heard it in months when he called me after meeting with the Denver police. "Mom, they think they've found evidence of another network, but this one is even bigger than Walsh's operation." The investigation had begun when a suspicious adoption agency in Colorado was flagged by social services. Families were paying enormous fees for expedited adoptions, receiving babies within weeks instead of the typical months or years of waiting. The speed should have been a red flag, but desperate parents were willing to pay $150,000 or more for the promise of immediate placement. "They want me to go undercover," Lucas said, and I felt my heart stop. "Absolutely not. You've been through enough. Mom, listen to me. They think this network has connections to Walsh's operation. Isabella might have been in contact with them while she was planning her crimes. If I can help stop them, maybe some good can come from all this pain." The FBI had discovered communications between Isabella and contacts in Colorado dating back over a year. She hadn't just been planning to steal one baby. She had been establishing herself as a reliable source for an ongoing trafficking operation that spanned multiple states. Detective Torres explained the situation when he called me directly. "Your daughter-in-law was more involved than we initially realized. She wasn't just a victim Walsh recruited. She was actively building her own network. The pregnancy with the Chen baby was supposed to be her audition for bigger opportunities." The revelation hit me like another betrayal. Even after everything we'd learned about Isabella's capacity for deception, there were still more layers of evil to uncover. What would Lucas have to do? I asked. Pose as a desperate adoptive father with money to spend and few questions to ask. His experience with the previous case gives him credibility and insight into how these operations work. Lucas had grown a beard and gained back some weight during his months in Colorado, changing his appearance enough that he could conceivably infiltrate the adoption agency without being recognized. His construction work had given him a cover story, a successful contractor with money to spend on expensive adoption fees. "I want to do this, Mom," Lucas said during our next conversation. "I need to do this. Every family they destroy is a family I could have helped save." I understood his need for redemption, but the danger terrified me. These weren't just white-collar criminals. Walsh's network had included people willing to murder medical professionals who threatened to expose them. If Lucas was discovered, he could face violence or worse. But something had changed in my son during his months in Colorado. The guilt and self-hatred that had consumed him after Isabella's arrest had transformed into determination and purpose. He was ready to fight the darkness that had nearly destroyed our family. The operation began 3 weeks later. Lucas, wearing a wire and carrying fake financial documents showing substantial assets, walked into Rocky Mountain Family Services, pretending to be a wealthy widower desperate to adopt quickly. "My wife died in a car accident 6 months ago," he told the agency director, following the script the FBI had prepared. "We were supposed to adopt together, but now I just need something positive in my life. I don't care about the cost." The agency director, a woman named Carol Stevens, immediately began discussing premium placement options that could bypass normal waiting periods. The fees were astronomical, $200,000 for guaranteed placement within 60 days, but she assured Lucas that the babies came from carefully screened birth mothers who prefer private arrangements. What she didn't tell him was that many of these birth mothers were actually surrogates who believed they were carrying babies for legitimate intended parents. The agency was stealing children from both sides, taking money from desperate adoptive families while betraying the surrogates and biological parents who trusted them. For 6 weeks, Lucas gathered evidence. He recorded conversations about falsified documents, met with corrupt lawyers who specialized in fraudulent adoptions, and even attended meetings where stolen babies were displayed to potential buyers like merchandise at an auction. "The hardest part," he told me during one of our careful phone conversations, "is seeing the babies and knowing that their real families are out there somewhere, grieving for children they think are dead." The network was vast, reaching into hospitals in 5 states, involving dozens of medical professionals, lawyers, and administrators. Conservative estimates suggested they had stolen over 200 babies in 3 years, generating revenues exceeding $30 million. But Lucas's investigation revealed something even more shocking. Isabella had been in contact with Carol Stevens while she was pregnant with the Chen baby. The communication showed that she had been planning to deliver multiple stolen children to the Colorado network, establishing herself as a reliable supplier in exchange for a percentage of the profits. She was going to franchise the operation, Detective Torres explained, use the money from the first theft to expand into a multi-state network with herself as a regional coordinator. The scope of Isabella's ambitions was breathtaking. She hadn't just been planning to steal one child for money. She had been building a criminal empire that would have destroyed hundreds of families over the coming years. On a cold February morning, coordinated raids in 5 states brought down the entire network. Carol Stevens and 14 co-conspirators were arrested, assets worth $50 million were frozen, and 43 stolen children were identified for return to their biological families. Lucas's undercover work had provided the evidence needed to prosecute the leaders and dismantle an operation that would have continued growing if left unchecked. The boy who had once hit his mother in blind rage had become a man who risked his life to protect other families from the evil that had infected his own. When he called me that night, I could hear the exhaustion and relief in his voice. "It's over, Mom. It's really over." But I knew it wasn't over. Not for us. This was the beginning of something new. 1 year after Jonathan Chen Jr.'s birth, I stood in my kitchen looking at a different kind of family photo on my refrigerator. Lucas in his FBI commendation ceremony, receiving recognition for his undercover work. The Chens at little Jonathan's first birthday party, with Emily proudly holding her baby brother. And a new addition, a picture of myself at the graduation ceremony for victim advocates, having completed training to officially counsel families affected by adoption fraud. Lucas had moved back to Hartford 6 months ago, not to live with me, but to work with the FBI's new task force focused on human trafficking. His experience on both sides of the crime, as an unwitting accomplice, and later as an undercover investigator, made him uniquely qualified to identify and infiltrate similar networks. "The work isn't easy," he told me over coffee in my kitchen, the same room where Isabella had once applauded my beating. "Every case brings back memories of what we went through, but it also reminds me why this matters." He was different now, calmer, more focused, carrying himself with the confidence of a man who had found his purpose. The angry, manipulated person Isabella had helped create was gone, replaced by someone who used his pain as fuel for protecting others. We had both learned to live with the scars. My jaw still ached sometimes when the weather changed, a physical reminder of that terrible night. But the emotional wounds had healed differently, not disappearing, but transforming into wisdom and strength we hadn't possessed before. Isabella was scheduled for release in 18 months. Her letters to Lucas had stopped coming after he testified in the Colorado case, sealing additional convictions that added 3 years to her original sentence. The divorce had been finalized, the house sold to pay her legal debts, and her name legally removed from any connection to our family. "Do you ever wonder what she thinks about?" Lucas asked. "I try not to," I answered honestly. "She made her choices, and now she has to live with them. Our job is to make sure those choices don't define the rest of our lives." The Chen family had become unexpected extended family to us. Jonathan Jr. was walking now, a curious toddler who called me Grandma Pat and brought me drawings he made with his big sister Emily. Marie and I had grown close through our shared experience, two mothers who understood how quickly evil could infiltrate a family. "He looks like his father," I told Marie, as we watched Jonathan Jr. play in my yard during one of their visits. "But he has his mother's determination," she replied, laughing as the little boy stubbornly insisted on climbing a tree that was clearly too big for him. The victim support group had evolved into something more permanent, a nonprofit organization that provided counseling, legal assistance, and advocacy for families affected by adoption fraud and human trafficking. I served on the board, using my story to educate others about the warning signs we had all missed. During one of our public speaking engagements, a woman approached me afterward with tears in her eyes. "My daughter is pregnant," she said. "She's considering surrogacy to help with college expenses. After hearing your story, I'm going to make sure we research everything carefully." These moments made all the pain worthwhile, knowing that our experience could prevent other families from enduring similar betrayals. Lucas had started dating someone new, a fellow FBI agent named Sarah, who understood the demands of his work and the shadows of his past. When he brought her to meet me, I could see the peace in his eyes that had been missing for so long. "She knows everything," he told me privately, "about Isabella, about what I did to you, about the whole mess, and she still chooses to be here." "That's what real love looks like," I said. "Someone who sees your worst moments and helps you become better, not someone who manipulates your weaknesses for their own gain." The house felt different now, too. I had renovated the living room where the assault happened, replacing the furniture and repainting the walls. But more than the physical changes, the emotional atmosphere had shifted. The fear and tension that had clouded those final months with Isabella were gone, replaced by a sense of safety and purpose. On Christmas Eve, exactly 2 years after Isabella's pregnancy revelation, I hosted dinner for an unusual but wonderful family. Lucas and Sarah, the Chens with both children, Jennifer Washington and her daughter, and Dr. Martinez from our support group. We were all connected by trauma, but we had chosen to build something beautiful from the pieces. As we sat around my table, sharing stories and laughter, I realized something profound. Isabella's betrayal had not destroyed our capacity for trust and love. It had refined it, teaching us to value authentic relationships and recognize the difference between manipulation and genuine care. "I want to make a toast," Lucas said, standing with his glass raised. "To second chances, to the families that love us despite our mistakes, and to the children who are safe tonight because we chose to fight back against the darkness." We all raised our glasses, survivors, heroes, and healing hearts united by our refusal to let evil have the final word. Little Jonathan Jr. clapped his hands at the toast, not understanding the words, but sensing the love that filled the room. In his innocent joy, I saw the future, bright, hopeful, and protected by people who had learned to choose courage over comfort. Isabella's story was one of betrayal and greed. But our story, the story of how we survived her crimes and built something better from the wreckage, that story was just beginning. Thank you for following Patricia Lambert's incredible journey of betrayal, courage, and ultimate justice. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales of resilience and triumph over adversity. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I love hearing from our global family. Your support helps us share these important stories that remind us all that even in our darkest moments, hope and justice can prevail.